So here's the question. Here it was question number 6. Now in the exams that you might have, there might be it might be question 8 or 9, who knows, but the question layout will not change. So here it says 6.1. If you invest 82,000 Rand for 5 years, with simple interest being calculated at 7.5% per year, what is the amount at the end of the period? What do? Simple interest is R, so you will go with your highlighters, and when you look at the question, you will see R. There's the word that I'm looking for. The word is simple interest. Okay? If I see that, I immediately write down the simple interest formula. Okay? And then I simply replace the values. Now, in this case, I was asked the amount at the end of the period, but interest calculation, in my interest formula, I'm calculating the interest itself. So let's first do that. I have P, I have the interest rate, and I have the time. So I can simply replace the values and I get my interest rate. But that is the interest and not the amount at the end of the period. So I have to calculate the amount at the end of the period. A equals P plus I. So A is then equal to the 82,000 that I know, my principal, plus the 30,000 that I've just calculated, for a total of 112,750 Rand. Six 6.2 is exactly the same, actually. It is just in the first part, they talked about an investment, and now they are talking about a loan, but it doesn't matter. It stays the same. It says if you borrowed 25,000 for 4 years at 12.25% simple interest, how much will you repay at the end of the period? Once again, simple interest is asked. We write down the formula. We replace the values. We get to the total. But once again, that is the interest and not the amount at the end of the period. So we take the principal that was given, we add to that the interest that we've just calculated, and we get to the amount at the end of the period, Okay, now please pay attention with 6.3. 6.3 says calculate the simple interest on 750,000 borrowed for 48 months at 11.25% per annum. Simple interest is asked, so once again, we just put down the formula and we get the interest. We calculate the interest. But now let's look what's happening here. We say we have 48 months. So that's the first thing. Because we are working with 48 months, we must divide it by 12 to get to the number of years. So the number of years is 4. Okay. So therefore we use T as 4, and then we get to the amount of 337. So always when you read, just read well to see, are they giving it to you in months or are they giving it to you in year, because you want it in years. 6.4. What is the principal that must be invested for 4 years at 10.5% to earn 4,950 simple interest? So once again, you see the word simple interest. What you do is you write down the simple interest formula. We must get P alone on one side of the equation, so we divide both sides with R times T. Now we have the normal P equals I over R times T, and we just replace the values and we get to the answer. 6.5. You have invested 55,000 at a bank at a simple interest rate of 6.5% per annum. For how long should you invest it to yield a future value amount for this future value of this? Okay, so what do you have? This is simple. You have the principal and you have the future value. So the interest is simply the difference between the two. You already saw the word simple interest in the question. So you start by writing down the simple interest formula again. But we don't know I or T, so we must first find the interest. And we do that, as I said to you, by subtracting the principal from the future amount that we were given, and then we now have the interest. Now we must get the time period alone by dividing both sides of the equation with P times R. So we do that, simply replace the values, and we get an amount, a number here of 42.56, but this must have a unit, and because we are looking for the time, the unit is years. Okay, 6.6. If you want to make an investment at a bank at a simple interest rate of 7 2/3% per annum. Now you know by now that 2/3 is 0.6666 repetitive, or you can just write it as 0.67. Okay. That will yield a future value after of 50,000 after 5 years. Determine the principal to be invested. Now, once again, you see the word simple interest in the question, so you start by writing down the normal formula, but now in this case, you cannot use it because we don't know either the interest or the principal. The only thing that we know is the future value. So what happens now is that the A replaces the I in that formula. It falls to the ground, becomes the 1, and now we have the P equals 1 over 1 times the rate times the time. We simply replace the values and we get to the answer. So far what I'm trying to show you is that everything that we do, and that you are asked in the exam is what I just showed you in the slides. Now here's the next one. It says determine the difference in interest earned when 140,000 is invested for 10 years at an interest rate of 3 3/4. 3/4 is 70.75 in the following ways. Simple and then interest compounded interest. So we write down the formula for simple, and we replace the values and we get the answer. Then we write down the formula for compound. We replace the values and we get the value of the future value. But that is A and we require I, so we first calculate I equals A minus the principal. We get the interest value that will be applicable for compound interest, but because we are asked to calculate the difference, we subtract the one from the other and we come up with the difference, exactly as I showed you in the slide. 6.8 says, if an investor invests 18,720 Rand for 2 years at an interest rate of 8.5% per annum, what will be the value of this investment at the end of 2 years if interest is calculated as follows? So once again, they say distinguish between simple and interest. So you write down the two formulas, that one and that one. Okay. You simply replace the values and you get to an answer. But in this case, they asked you what will the value of this investment be? So you are looking for A. So you can't use the I that you've just calculated. You must add that I to the principal to get to the future value. In the case of the compound interest, you simply replace the values and you get an answer. And then once again, you must calculate the difference between the two, and when you do that, that is the answer that you are given. Okay. And then the last one that we get is the compound one, where there is more than one compounding period in the year. And it says an investment will be worth this amount if invested for 9 years at this rate, compounded quarterly. Now there are 4 quarters in a year. So you already now know that you are going to divide the interest of 6.55 by 4. You can do it, some of you on the side already. And you are going to multiply the 9 years with 4. Okay, so we write down the compound interest formula to start with, but we must first make P the subject of the formula, because that's our question, what is the present value of the investment? So we make P the formula and we get to that equation. Okay, but since we compound quarterly 4 times per year, the interest must be divided by 4, and the period N must be multiplied by 4. So we replace the values in like that, and then that is the answer. Now, guys, just on a note here, some of you have asked me before, do we have to show every step? Now, in a question like this, I would say show every step, because if you key something wrong into your calculator, then at least they can see that you did follow all the steps and it was just a finger fault.